Good morning, everyone. We'll continue here in the Mesillas Yesharim, and the Ramchal is describing to us all of these areas where if a person just begins to guard themselves carefully from the beginning, making the proper precious, proper separation, they will steer clear of sin. We have the case of a ben Sar Mor, a rebellious child, a son who goes against his parents in so many different ways. The punishment is he gets killed. How could he get killed? He didn't do anything so terrible yet, because the Torah goes to the end of the Torah projects what's going to be the end of this child. He's going to steal his father's property. He's going to want money, won't find it. He'll go to the crossroads, and he's going to rob from people. And therefore, says the Gemara, since that we see that this person is going to lead a dark life of thievery and stealing and violence and gluttony and the like, as the Gemara goes on to explain over there, so we already see the telltale signs at this point. We'll remove him from his misery so he doesn't have to do all these terrible things. If he would have been a parish, if he would have separated himself and not begun to indulge in the pleasure of this world, he would not have become a ben Sar Umar. The Chein al Inyan has no son Luzzato when it comes to illicit relations. Anyone who sees a saita, a woman who is accused of cheating on her husband, and in fact she did, she goes through all of this shame and embarrassment that she has to do in front of the Bezdin, in front of all the Jewish people. Anyone who's watching, they should take on a nazirus, they should take on a vow that they're not going to drink wine, because wine ends up bringing a person to znos, to licentiousness. What do we see from here? That if a person would take a vow and not drink wine during that time, it's a tremendous strategy which is going to save him from the nets of his Yetzer Hara. He cave on sins should be Yosef Basic Avera while he's involved in the Avera, in the sin itself. When a person is involved in the Avera, it's very difficult to save himself from it and subdue the Yetzer Hara. Therefore, when you are still far away from it, Yashir Atzma Racha, keep yourself far away from the sin. Because the farther you stay away from sin, the more difficult it is for the Yetzer Hara to draw you in close, and therefore you'll be protected. To have relations, marital relations with one's wife, that's completely permissible. However, the Gemara says that if a man had a seminal emission, and that would come from relations, he's supposed to go to the mikveh. Why? Because we don't want that Talmidei Chachamim, Torah scholars, should be like roosters around their wives, meaning constantly together with their wives. So we made them go to the mikveh. The Talmid Chacham is not going to go to the mikveh every single day. Either he's going to be embarrassed, people will figure out what's going on, or it's going to take up too much of his time from his studies. So therefore he won't be with his wife constantly. Even though having relations with one's wife is completely permissible, of course, when she is, after she's gone to the mikveh and she's no longer in nida. If a person overindulges in relations with his wife, it's going to implant inside of him this taiva, this desire. And because that taiva, that desire becomes so great, it's quite possible that it'll draw him into a place of isser, prohibition. What's the prohibition over here? That if a man and is so used to having a relation with his wife, even when she goes into nida, she's menstruating. When he's not allowed to be with her, the taiva, the desire is so strong, he won't be able to control himself, and will end up having prohibited relations with his wife when she is a nida. Okay, Memorim Zal, like Chazal teach us, Ever Katan Yesh B'Adam, there's one little limb inside of a man, that's his private area. Masbia, if you satisfy it, Ra'ev, it gets hungrier. Marivai, if you starve it, Saveya, it gets satisfied. And therefore, say Chazal, a person should be careful how much he indulges in that act of relations with one's wife. because it just incites more and more desires that will take him away from this path of avodas Hashem. Furthermore, even when you're allowed to be with your wife, and it's the right time. It says about Rabbi Eliezer, he barely removed his clothing in order to have relation with his wife, keeping himself covered and modest. And he made himself as if he was possessed over here by a demon, which means he looked at it as a complete indulgence in the physical pleasures of the world, and therefore he did things quickly without deriving benefit. Even at the time that he was allowed to have pleasure, he refused that pleasure from himself. Now, this case of Rabbi Eliezer over here is a special case for a very great tzaddik and a person who was a parish, who had separated himself completely from the pleasures of this world. It is not the minhag, it is not the custom of Klal Yisrael. I'm not going to go into the details, for it is a more private matter and private conversation. Nevertheless, and notwithstanding, this is not the way in which husbands and wives today are involved in the act of marital relations. It takes on a much different approach, which is a much more understanding and sensitive approach, and it includes what we would call a much more down-to-earth approach. And that's, yes, even in the frum world, that's the way that we do things. If anybody has questions, I'm not going to talk about it here publicly on this shiur for men and for women. If anybody has questions, they're welcome to call me, and I'm happy to speak about it. So this, the Mesillas Yesharim is teaching us, is that when a person gets in control of the taivas of the desires by being a parish, by having some level of precious, of separation in life, that's the way that they will make sure that they don't come to do things that are going to be overt violations of Torah laws, of Kedusha, and of sanctity. Have a wonderful day.